Hi everybody, Chris Pies here with another PCA Sim Racing Classroom. We have a new season upon us. This is season 15 of PCA Series Racing. It's kind of unbelievable to think that we've been through 15 or 14 seasons so far and we're going into our 15th, but here we are. I don't know how that makes me feel. Time is ticking, but it is what it is. This season we are going to be in the Porsche 992.1 GT3R. That is a mouthful. It is Porsche's GT3 classification race car. It is a rear-engined, rear-drive format, so RR. It's the only GT3 car that is like that in iRacing, and I think probably in real life as well. I can't think of another one that is truly rear engine drive. The car is set up for mostly endurance races, meaning that it's in its normal form pretty straightforward and easy to drive. I'd say at probably 90-95%. Getting it to that full 100% though is where the magic sauce or the essence is, how to get to that point. So what we're going to do is for tonight, since this is the first classroom for season 15 with a new car from last season, we're going to talk about the car a little bit, and then we are also going to visit about the setup just a touch. And then we will talk about the track that we're racing, which again is a new item to PCA Sim Racing, and that is the Mexico track that iRacing added in, I believe, last season. I think it's one season deep, but the Mexico track, which is from all accounts pretty exciting. It should be some pretty good racing there, but there's definitely some little quirks. So let's talk about the car first. The car, like I said, is the GT3R. For Porsche. We've ran it in multiple different types of racing before, and I think we've had it during a season in series racing for PCA before as well. So many of you may be familiar with it. But one of the things that maybe we aren't necessarily too familiar with is setups. In the past, other than Pro and Club, we've had fixed setups for Sport and Challenge, but I believe now everybody can run anything, any setup. So one of the questions that is common, and I think I already heard it before we went live tonight, is, what setup should we be running? Or, where's this? Anybody have a good setup for this track or something like that? The thing I will preface any kind of setup discussion is that a setup, other than certain very odd circumstances, is not going to necessarily make the car faster. The setup is to make you as the driver more comfortable with the car. And if you are more comfortable with the car, you will be faster as a result because your comfort level is higher. Obviously, taking out downforce on a car is going to reduce the drag, which will increase its top speed. But if you remove downforce, you remove grip at higher speeds. And so the advantage you gain on a straightaway, you are going to give that back under high-speed corners or maneuverability, in that you will not have as much grip overall. Your traction circle will be smaller than somebody that is running a full downforce setup that may be going slower on the straight. So that's a little bit of a balance. But in general, setup is for driver comfort and not necessarily outright speed. A setup, unless your setup is completely screwed up, which is very hard to do, but if your setup is completely screwed up, then maybe there may actually be a setup that is technically better and technically faster. But in general, most setups are driver comfort. So when you see an alien out there that's coming out and running, multiple seconds faster than you on a track, thinking that if you just had their setup, you would now be within half a second of them is probably not the case. Your comfort level may be higher with that setup, but more likely their setup is probably a little bit more edgy in order to get the car to perform the way they want, but they're more comfortable with that unbalancedness. So let's talk about real quick the GT3R. So I took some screen grabs real quick of the setup options that we have on this car. At first glance, is a little bit crazy. There's a lot of things that you can change on the car, a lot of little tools in your toolbox. But let's kind of just briefly discuss what they do and what the outcome tends to be if you maneuver things. In general, as an overall kind of rule of thumb, the softer a portion of the car, the more grip that portion of the car has. A softer suspension is going to let the suspension travel than a harder suspension. A harder suspension is going to transfer load quicker, but it's also going to stop that transfer quicker. A car loses or no longer gains grip, mechanical grip, once the suspension stops traveling. If you think of it like this, if you're taking a right-handed turn, your left side of your suspension is going to load up. As soon as the left side suspension stops its compression and stops its load, there will be no more additional grip that comes into the vehicle. If the suspension is softer, it allows that suspension to take more load and allows more grip. If it is super firm, you will get to its maximum grip state, but theoretically it doesn't have as much mechanical grip as a softer suspension. Well, what's the trade-off? Why shouldn't you just run a soft suspension? The trade-off is a soft suspension feels like jelly or marshmallows. Soft suspensions tend not to be able to handle maneuvers very quickly. So, for instance, if you need to go left and then right very quickly, a soft suspension has to not only compress its suspension one way, but then it has to release it and then compress the other way. If it's soft, it's going to take time to do that. If it's a firm suspension, the car is going to be able to make those maneuvers much more quickly. It's going to feel much more darty with a firmer suspension. So that's kind of a general rule of thumb. More grip, soft equals grip, firm equals less grip. So let's talk about what we've got here and what are the tools in our toolbox for the GT3R. We've got 3 different tabs. You got tires and aero, chassis, and dampers. Tires and aero is this little window down here in the bottom right that has the pressures. Rule of thumb, run minimum pressures. The way iRacing models its tires currently, you don't want to add pressure to the tires because what that's going to cause it to balloon at higher temperatures, and you're going to be giving away free grip. So if you bump these up a PSI or 2, once the tires are hot pressure, you're going to have less grip than somebody else that did not. So I recommend just leave the pressures at their minimum, which is this case is 23 PSI. Underneath these, you will see things like last temps and tread remaining. This is giving you the temperature of your outer, middle, and inner part of the tires and the tread remaining on those portion or those relative or respective areas of the tire from the tires that just came off the car. So if you go out there and do 10 laps and you park the car on the side of the road and you escape and tow it back to pit lane, if you open up your garage and you look at this, you will see what the state of the tires are when they came off the car. Same thing if you're in a race, you come in and you pit. As soon as you hit the pit box and you come to a stop, this or in your in one of your black boxes, I think it's like F6 or F7, you can press it, you will get a similar picture, and it will tell you at that time the state of the tires, but only when you're in pit lane. It's modeling a crew member coming over and taking temperatures of the surface of the tire and taking a look at it to give you that information. So overall, what we're trying to do when you're doing your practice, one of the things that we can do to try to, in addition to driver feeling and comfort, is look at how tires are wearing. If tires are wearing abnormally on one corner of the car, we probably have an imbalance in the setup, and we probably want to fix it. If a portion of the tire is getting really hot and wearing too quickly, like the inner section, we might have too much camber in the car, meaning that the tires are leaned in. Tire degradation, tire temperatures, and their wear patterns can go a long way to telling us as drivers what the car is, where you're putting the stress in the car. Theoretically, the tires or the balance should be relatively balanced. There shouldn't be too much. There shouldn't be like 20% difference between the front right and the front left tire, for instance, except for very, very special circumstances. So in general, we want them to be in the same ballpark, but that's a good way to see what's going on. Down at the bottom, we have an aero balance calculator. This is for you to kind of figure out if you put your wing setting at a certain wing, it will tell you what your ride height is at a certain speed. If you ever forget any of this, if you hover over any of the adjustment points, there's a tooltip that pops up that can give you more info on it that can kind of explain what's going on. But that in general is kind of the tire aero tab. But this doesn't actually make any changes to the vehicle other than the tire temperatures and pressures, which we will not touch as we discussed before. The second one is chassis, and that's what this big window is. This is where your main adjustments occur. So this is where you can change your anti-roll bars on the front and rear. This is where you can change your ride heights, your spring rates, your gearing, and how everything works on that front. So there's a lot of things that we can change. I will go from coarse adjustment to finer adjustment and kind of describe what's going on. Your coarsest adjustment that you probably have is your ARBs. So that's an anti-roll bar sits and connects the right side of the car to the left side of the car. And it basically interacts with how the two sides of the car are working. It's like it's a spring that works horizontally. And so as one side flexes and the other one, that spring is going to provide additional tension. I'm not an engineer, but that's how I understand it. The firmer or the higher the number on the ARB, the stiffer the roll bar. And as we discussed at the beginning, the stiffer a portion of the car, the less mechanical grip it has. The softer, the more mechanical grip it has. So if you go, I think they go up to 7 in the 911. If you go up to a 7 ARB, that is the stiffest setting that you can have, which means that you get good response out of that, but you're going to hit its limit in grip quicker than if you go to a 1 or a 2. These ARBs work for the front axle and the rear axle. This is a great way to be able to set up a car and its tendencies for understeer and oversteer. For an example, if you have a very stiff front ARB and a very soft rear ARB, you are basically saying, I want all the grip to be on the rear axle. I want less grip to be on the front axle. So I want the car to understeer. The front axle is going to lose grip first in a turn. When the front axle loses grip first, what happens? The car just kind of slides and it understeers. The inverse is also true. If you go super soft on the front and super firm on the rear, what you're asking is for the rear of the car to lose grip first relative to the front. And under load, theoretically, the rear should cut out or should let go first, which is going to cause the tail to wag a bit and is going to cause oversteer. So knowing that about the axles of the car, you can kind of try to set up the car as you're driving it. Say you're driving around, you're saying, man, this thing does not want to turn, especially in the high speed stuff. It's just super firm up front. It's just the front is just plowing. Okay, well, look at where the ARB is. If the ARB is super high, knock it down. Add some grip to the front axle. If the rear is super soft, stiffen it up. Add some oversteer into the car and see if you can get a better balance that way. So those are your coarse adjustments. The next one we can talk about ride height. Ride height is down here. You have one on each corner of the car. So you have left front, left rear, right rear. The ride height used to be a spring perch adjustment that got changed, thank God. And now you've got a ride height adjustment, just static. This is how high it is. There's always a minimum ride height. I recommend run the front end of the Porsche at minimum. It gives you the best aero that you have available. You don't want to run that thing super high in the air, except if you're running on tracks like Nürburgring, something that has situations where you may get front end strikes on your front splitter because the car is not sitting high enough. So other than that, run as pretty much as low as you can. And I think on this particular screenshot, I am as low as I can go. Your bump rubber gap, that is something that's relatively new, I think within the past year. It's basically a little rubber grommet in the suspension, rather than the suspension completely my understanding is it's basically setting a stop point to how much the suspension could compress. If you are on a really smooth track and you've got really high load corners, you may want to limit the maximum amount of suspension travel that you could possibly have to try to keep aero balance. Because if the car is rolling over in high speeds, the more it tends to, tilt on its axis, like this, like an airplane. The less effective the wings and the aero are on the car. So keeping it flat is going to provide you the most aero benefit. So adding rubber gaps to prevent the suspension from allowing under super high loads to completely rotate and kill the aero is kind of preferable. So you can change the rubber gap so it basically will sit on those. It'll stop the suspension from flexing. It's not good when you're going over curbs though. If you're hitting a curb really hard and you have that rubber gap really low, that suspension is going to hit that rubber gap, and instead of being the strike of the curb being transferred into the spring and the damper, it's going to be transferred into the whole chassis, and the car is going to jump like it hit rock or something like that. You ever drive on Coda or something like that and you hit those turtles and the car just bounces straight up in the air? Well, if you want to experience that all the time on normal curbs, throw that rubber gap as low as it goes and you'll get a very similar experience. Not fun. The next one is your spring rate. It works very much with a similar idea as the ARBs. Lower spring rate means softer suspension. Softer suspension theoretically gives you more grip, mechanical grip, but it takes longer to compress the springs because they have to travel further. Spring rate, a higher spring rate tends to make the car more maneuverable, more responsive. Lower spring rate tends to allow more grip into the car, make it softer. Lower spring rates also tend to deal better with curb strikes in those instances. And then you've got the camber. Camber is the laying over of the tires in the suspension. So if you are running negative camber, obviously we all should be running negative camber. That's the top of the tire is further inboard than the rear or the bottom of the tire. And that's preferable. In general, you want to probably be running a lot of camber to try to offset some of the cornering forces. Finally, probably another really important thing is the wing setting down here at the bottom. Wing setting is the amount of attack that you have on your rear wing. Effectively, what it comes down to is a higher wing setting is going to add more downforce to the rear of the car, the rear only. Lower wing will add less downforce to the rear, but also less drag. So more wing, more grip in the rear, more drag, less wing, less grip in the rear, less drag. Whenever you make a change to the wing, you also probably should change your ride height in the rear of the car as well. Because think about it, the faster you go, if you have a lot of rear downforce, the more aero you have acting on that wing. And the way that works is it pushes the rear of the car down. If you keep everything the same and you just add wing, it's going to, the aero and the wind as you go faster is going to push the rear of the car down further down than maybe you want it at high speed. So to compensate that, you raise the rear up a little bit. So when the aero acts on it, it pushes it to where you would want it on a basic setting. And then finally, the last thing I'll kind of talk about here is, or the second last thing, is in line with that, you have rake of the vehicle. So that's ride heights. Rake is the relative ride height from the rear to the front. If you have positive rake, that means you've got the rear end of the car is super high. If you've got negative rake, you got a Carolina squat. You've got the rear lower than the front. In general, we'll be running positive rake in any of these sports cars. The more rake you have in the vehicle, the more oversteer there tends to be. So basically what you're doing is you're adding grip to the front axle by putting more weight up on the front axle and taking it away from the rear. If you are struggling with grip in the rear of the car, try lowering or taking out rake in the vehicle. That is going to have the same effect as kind of like softening the rear without changing the anti-roll bars. So multiple ways to get to the same platform. But at the end of the day, the whole point of setup is to get to a comfort level with the vehicle that you're not worried that it's going to snap on you in high speed corners. You're not worried that you're going to lose it under braking. And the car is going to do and respond the way you want it to when you go and make a maneuver with the vehicle. There's not a silver bullet that's going to make you go faster by if you change the ARB from 4 to 2 in the front, you're now going to unlock half a second. That doesn't exist. It's comfort level for the driver, and then getting that driver comfortable will enable that driver to go faster, to push the car harder. I will say that setups that tend to go quicker are the more unstable ones. They're the ones that tend to have oversteer baked into the vehicle because oversteer allows rotation in the car. If you don't have oversteer and you have an understeery car, you're fighting that front axle and you have to overslow the car to get it to turn. Whereas the same car with an oversteer setup is going to be able to just rotate the car quicker, get it pointed in the right direction sooner, and hopefully get fired out of a corner faster. Two real quick things I will talk about. Gears and differential down here in the bottom right. What the heck does that do? The big thing I'd say to kind of focus on here is your gear stack. You should be running FIA, which is the shorter gear stack, which means closer ratio gears, unless you're on a track like Le Mans or Daytona, where you're hitting 6th gear and you're capping out and you're topping out. I would say leave it in FIA unless we're going to Daytona this season. I'm not totally sure. We might be. And then if when we get there, changes to Daytona. That's why it's called Daytona, because people run it at Daytona. Your clutch faces and your diff preload. Let's put it this way. The way I understand it is that when the higher your friction faces and the higher your diff preload is, you're creating a almost like a solid rear axle, or you're basically locking the rear tires to each other. So it's like a locked differential, not completely locked, of course, but it's getting that concept is there. So like coming out of really slow corners where you need to get on the power, if you've got an axle that is locking sooner, that both wheels are going to be pushing you forward. If you have an open diff, what's going to happen is you turn that wheel, you put on the throttle, and you potentially spin that inside tire because there's no grip. And so when you do that, all the power is going to be going to the place that's losing traction, because that's the path of least resistance. And so you theoretically aren't going to get the squirt coming out of the corner. You're going to be hitting traction control in this car, which is going to hamper your exits. It also has an effect going around corners as well. Higher diff locking tends to, and I always get this confused, I would recommend looking at the tooltip. It tells you a little bit more detail. I think a higher diff is going to give you understeer off throttle. So if you take off throttle, it's going to be harder to turn. So it's going to tend to understeer, where an opener diff is going to give you a little bit more oversteer. But in general, I tend to run it what you see here, something around 6 or 8 for the friction faces. And I like a lower preload, so a little bit more of an open diff than a closed diff. Finally, on the third tab, dampers, you've got your shocks. These are your dampers. Dampers are like a black art. You could do a ton of research on it to try to figure out what's going on with them. In general, it's how quickly the chassis is basically setting itself back to neutral and how it reacts over compression and rebound. So in theory, basically the lower the number, the firmer the damping. So basically the harder it is to push the damper or release the quicker the damper is going to release. The higher the number, the softer it is. So the more it's going to squish and come back out, but not necessarily cause it to happen quickly, or it's going to compress quickly, but it's not going to release quickly. It's going to be super soft. Inside of a shock is fluid, effectively. And so what it does is it firms up that fluid. So if you have a really high number, that fluid is going to be very soft, and the damper is going to kind of like do nothing. The spring is going to be doing what it's doing, and the damper is just going to be along for the ride. If you have a low number here, your damper is super firm. And so when the spring would normally compress, the damper is going to be fighting that compression and then pushing it back out to rebound quicker. The big thing I use dampers for more than anything is the high speed stuff. If I'm on a track that has a lot of curbing and a lot of curb strikes, I will soften that high speed compression. As you can see here, it's sitting at 18. High speed compression is going to allow that wheel to pop up quickly. And the suspension is going to absorb that strike rather than the chassis absorbing the strike and bouncing the car. I want the wheel to pop up, not the whole car to pop up. And then I have the rebound is how quickly it goes back down to the state. So I actually make that a little firmer. I want the wheel to pop up relatively easily, but I also want it to return back to the state pretty quickly. So that's in theory what I'm trying to do. I don't know if I'm actually achieving it. Somebody smarter with dampers could probably weigh in and give us more detail. But my understanding is dampers are the super fine adjustment on a suspension. You don't start there, you finish there, so to speak. All right, I threw a ton at you guys on the setup side. Is there any questions?
That was good.
I'm always having a problem with ride height.
Yeah.
I'm always too low, and then when I add the fuel, it makes it worse. Take the fuel out, I don't have enough fuel.
So
what's a good...
Yeah. So here's your fuel number right here on the top left, 18.5 in this case. As you add fuel, the fuel tank in this vehicle is up on the front axle. So the front of the car is going to be smushed down. Basically, adding more fuel is going to cause your front ride height to go lower. If it goes too low, like for instance, if you have a quality setup that has very little fuel and you just max out the fuel, you're going to be too low in the front. These little numbers right here on ride height for the front will turn yellow and then red. If it's red, you don't pass tech. If it's yellow, you're right at the line, but you technically passed. If you need to make an adjustment, you put all the fuel in, this number is sitting red and blinking at you, just click the little arrow and do it in pairs. Like, don't do it all on one side and then don't do it on the other. Do it 1 1 1 1 back and forth, because you want the front end to come up equally. Do it until it turns black like this, and then you're good to go. So that's how you adjust it. Now remember, if you are starting on 18.5 and you pull fuel out of the car, it's going to raise the nose of the car. So if you're like going from a full race setup and you want to go to quality fuel, you're going to take this 18.5 number and turn it into 4 gallons. The front end's going to stand up pretty significantly. So to adjust the front down to where you would want it, you will need to lower the ride height down to a number that is legal still. So.
Okay, this is a lot simpler than it used to be, because they
Yes.
had what yeah. So this is going to make it easier. Now the other question is, you're looking at ride height and bump stop, right? And are you supposed to take a measurement between the two, because you know you're going to have the suspension fully extended, and then you're trying to minimize that gap with the bump stop, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. But I don't know where they're measuring the bump gap, because on this situation, this would suggest that the bump gap is way above the ride height, right? So there's nowhere for the bump to be if it's past the ride height, right? But it's still in there.
Right,
so
they don't give you the final result in a full extension.
Yeah, exactly. So for me on Mexico, when I was on this setup that I was experimenting with, I was like, I want this thing to be a Cadillac going over these massive curbs. So I just put it as high as I possibly could, so it like basically doesn't have it. But that's where you're starting to get really super fine in the setup. My recommendation on rubber bump gap is, if you're gonna run a setup, I'm just gonna assume you don't have VRS or you don't have an aftermarket place that you're getting setups from. If you're just using the iRacing setup, for this race, I recommend starting with like medium downforce. I think this is a medium downforce track. It works well. Run it with the way it is and the way they've got it in there. If you're finding that your curbs are really upsetting your car and throwing it in the air, mess with the rubber bump gap. Raise it up so it's not making sure you're not hitting the bump gap, and experiment from there. But I would at least start somewhere that is a relatively good setup and go with that. I can also give you guys my setup. I have nothing to hide. I don't care. I started with VRS's. What did I choose? I used Imola because it was recent, and I guess Imola is kind of the same. And so I just started with that, and then I made adjustments to get it to this point. So I'll post it down below and do what I can to kind of give you a little bit more on that.
Thank you.
Chris, recommendations on front downforce, that percent?
Down here on you mean on the front downforce percent?
Yeah.
The car, they've got a recommendation. It's all relative. It depends on how you as a driver like it. If you like a super oversteery car, you're going to want a lower number here. If you like a understeery car, gives you more confidence, you're going to want a higher number here. Basically, the higher the number on the front downforce, the more aero understeer you're going to get. The front end is pushing in harder than not. So the car in the front axle is going to have more grip. So if you take front downforce away from the car under aero, this is the big caveat, right? We're talking aero. So if you're going 20 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour around a hairpin, aero is not doing anything at all on the car. The car has to be moving quickly for this to actually achieve something. Yeah, if you're going around corners and the rear end is starting to step out on you mid-corner under a high-speed corner, you may want to try to get that front downforce or up a little bit to try to give you some more aero balance, so to speak. But it's the calculator. I rarely look at it, frankly, but it's a good way to see make sure you're not like in the 30s, which means the rear has all the downforce and the front has none. Or I said that backwards. The more front downforce, the more oversteer the car has. The the less front downforce, the less understeer, which oversteer. So it's adding grip to the front of the front axle. So the higher that number, the more front axle grip. The more front axle grip it has, the less relative rear grip it has, which means oversteer. So higher this number percentage, if it's higher, you're going to have oversteer at high speeds. If it's lower, you're going to have understeer at high speeds. It depends on the user, frankly. So I don't have an ideal number. There is a theoretical best. And I think iRacing will tell you, if you hover over any of these numbers in the tooltip, it will tell you what the theoretical best maximum amount of grip the car can have. That's not necessarily that's not the best way to run the car necessarily, because that is assuming a certain state or balance of the car, which may have a lot of understeer. And if you like an oversteery car, you may drive an oversteery car faster than a car that theoretically has the most available grip available to it. So again, it's driver comfort over actual theoretical grip in the car. Because if there was a number that was theoretically, this is the setup that gives you the 100% the most amount of grip in the vehicle, then everybody would just run that, if that was true and that yielded the best performance. But that's not the case. You'll still see some people that run no downforce. You'll see people that run tons of downforce and get different results. Make sense? And along those lines, to get the maximum amount of grip, you'd have to have the maximum amount of wing. You'd have to have maximum downforce, because you're not only getting the grip, mechanical grip from the vehicle and the chassis, but you're also getting the most benefit from aero, from the wind going over the wings and pushing the car into the ground. Higher downforce means more grip. It's not necessarily means it's faster though, because if you got long straightaways like the front straight here at Mexico, it's going to cause drag, and you're not going to go as fast as somebody else that has a lower drag. So lower drag, somebody running a low downforce setup is not going to have as much mechanical grip as a high downforce car, but they may run faster lap times because the straightaways. Ironic. So, all right. Any other questions? Of course, if you have any other questions, you're always more than welcome to ask away or ask someone else that's smarter than me, frankly. But that's kind of the gist of it. All right, now let's go to Mexico. New track. Like I said, for us, fun track. I don't have a whole lot of time on it, so I'm going to give you my best analysis that I can. It's interesting. There's a lot of straightaways. There's a lot of nuance, but I don't think this track is necessarily difficult once you get the hang of it. Well, I think the most difficult part of the track is going to be the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 complex, which is like the S's. Those are really fast, but you get them wrong and you can get really ugly pretty quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are pretty similar concepts. Same thing with 13, 14, 15. But in general, the track seems to allow itself a lot of opportunity to pass. A lot of creative lines that are available to it, and I think it's going to be fun to race on. And I mean, it's a Formula One track. They're designed to kind of be that way. So let me go to cockpit. I'm going to just do a lap without me stopping it, so you can kind of see it at full speed. As I was discussing earlier, for those of you who came a little bit later, my lap time that I'm showing is a 41.7 with a full fuel load. Well, I guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 laps into a full fuel load. This is not a quality setup. And it is actually using the setup that I just was showing and that I'll put in discussion. My apologies if you don't have sound. The recording will have sound.
You can make the sound.
All right. There we go. So let's talk about it. Let's go far chase. Change my camera angle so it's a little bit more reasonable. So a couple of the big things that I saw while kind of rolling around this track is the track limits are incredibly forgiving around here. In general, so long as you've got a set of wheels touching the rumble strip, you're good. That's not a 1X. If you cross all four wheels over the rumble strip, not the white line, but over the whole rumble strip, that's where you start to get the X's. So once you start kind of thinking about that, it really helps with some of the curvings here. I bet you some of you saw that line on a couple of cases, especially like going through the fast S's that we were discussing earlier. Like it's super shallow and cutting the corner, but that's the fast way through there. At least that's what it felt like for me. So coming down the straightaway, coming into turn one, it's a really long straightaway. That's the biggest takeaway. The thing that you really need to focus on is you have to have a really good brake marker. There's going to be a lot of dive bombs, passing opportunities going into turn one, but you need to be disciplined and know where your brake marker is. It doesn't do you any good to, if you're racing somebody, to base your brake marker off that other person. In other words, I'm not going to brake until they brake, and then I'm going to brake just after. If you do that, you're going to be too late. Make sure you know your brake marker, because if they brake late and they sail through the corner and you're waiting for them to brake, you're going to sail through the corner. Be disciplined, understand where your brake zone is. Also understand that if you're braking online, which is over here on the left, you will have more braking capability than if you brake offline, especially later in the race as marbles build up. So a car braking in the middle of the track or on the right side of the track is going to have a lot less ability to brake well than somebody braking online where all the rubber is. So for me, I was finding out that somewhere just after the 5 board on the left is a good spot to brake. It's going to be basically a threshold brake. So we're right there at the ABS. If you go over the rumble strips and you brake with your tires over the rumble strips, just understand that you may get a little bit of imbalance, or you may get ABS sooner because the tires are kind of bouncing over an uneven surface. So I like to keep the car on the track right here for the brake point. So all 4 tires are really good contact and I can get a really good bite on the brake pedal. So I'm braking right here. It's actually closer to 4.5. And as I brake, I'm letting the car kind of drift over onto the rumbles. So as I get closer and closer to the corner, the grip in the tires is less and less important because I'm slowing down. And so after I've scrubbed off that initial really good speed, then I'll start to open up the corner by drifting over to the left a little bit. I'm looking and trying to keep my eyes down here at the apex. I'm looking for the yellow kind of sausage that's all the way through here. And then I'm going to try to turn in with the idea. My idea coming through this corner is I want to try to late apex it as best I can, but not to the detriment of like driving straight, then stopping and turning, because that's slow. I still want to get down to the corner, but my idea coming out of this corner, right side tires on the sausage or touching the sausage for 100%, but I want to not go past mid-track on the exit. This corner is relatively throwaway. We're trying to set up not the next corner, but the final corner. The final corner is the important corner out of this segment. So this is a throwaway. The next one's a throwaway. This last one is the one that we're trying to make work. So as we come through here, we want to try to get the car back over to the right to set up a shallow, or not a shallow, but a kind of a pinched exit on this next corner. So we're going to turn in. I was liking keeping it off the sausage here, because if you make a mistake and you hit the sausage, it's going to bounce the car off and out to the right a little bit. By getting a little bit wider and taking a late apex through here, it allows me to keep the car relatively left to try to get the run coming out of the final corner. The final corner, you can take a ton of it. This is not an X. This is totally fine. And the reason it's fine is because my left side tires are on the rumble. If you cross over the rumble, you're going to probably get a slowdown. If you're touching the rumble, you're good. So I am, if you look at where I'm getting on gas, I'm getting on gas through here in second gear. I turn it and rotate the car over to the right. I'm off the gas to allow a little bit of weight transfer to the front to give me that turn in that I need. But as soon as I get it and I get that car pointed, boom, I'm back on the gas. I mean, I'm at 80% throttle right here, and I haven't even hit the apex yet. 100% at the apex. And just drive it all the way through. So if I back that up and show it without me starting and stopping. We're going to come in, we're going to brake at about 4.5, 5. We're going to start our turn in here, but the idea is to try to not go past mid-track. Left hand, late apex, try to keep the car over to the left. Then as soon as we get through, rotate it right and get a good drive coming out. The only way you're going to be able to do that is if you keep your eyes up and you're looking through the corners. So when you're at the second apex, you're looking at the third apex. When you're coming up to the third apex, you're looking at track out. High, long vision is going to enable you to drive through those corners. Well, we'll talk about it more on this next set. So we have a similar kind of situation to the latter half of that last segment. So turn 4 coming up here. I tend to brake when the rumble strip gets to its fattest. So right around here is where I'm going to get on the brake pedal. Right there. Again, it is almost a full emergency stop. I mean, I am right on the ABS all the way down to first gear on this particular case. And for this one, I'm turning down. There is no sausage on the inside here, but like the previous corners, I'm trying to keep it tight on exit because I'm trying to set up the right-hander that comes after this. So I'm waiting. I'm here, but at this point, I am still going to keep rotating and keep turning the car after the corner. So rather than tracking out and ending up on the right side of the track, which really pinches me on the second one, I'm going to kind of keep the steering wheel engaged and get the car all the way over as far left as I can to try to set up the right-hander. So I get the car all the way over here, and then I start engaging this corner from way over here. And then one of the things that I've kind of discovered on this corner, you have to really late apex it. It's very easy to turn in too early for this corner. If you turn in too early and you apex at the front end of this sausage, guess what? You're going to run out of track. No matter how slow you go, you're going to run out of track on the exit. You have to be really, really disciplined and really late through here. So we want to be apexing on the latter half. So you can see my apex point is actually on the back half of this sausage, not the front. The front puts you out here where my cursor is. The back puts you down here. If you do it right, you can get on throttle pretty much at the apex. The car will get a little bit of oversteer because you're in first gear, and you'll end up right here, which 2 tires on the rumble, you're good to go. Get a good squirt coming out. So let me back it up. This corner feels like to me like Indianapolis after the back straight. If you've run Indianapolis after the back straight and you're coming down the back straight at Indianapolis, you've got that tight left and then right-hander. This left-hander feels exactly like the left-hander there, except you're trying to keep it even more over to the left than at Indy. Get it left, turn it right, late apex, a little bit of brake to get that rotation, and then back on throttle coming out to get a good squirt. We've got the double apex at 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. For 7 and 8, I displaced the first apex. I'm in first gear, so I'm not getting down here and treating this like a double apex. I'm treating it like one apex. My apex is the second apex, basically. So ignoring this first one, basically bringing the car down for a late apex on the second sausage. So there it is, waiting. There's my second one. The apex is on the latter half of this first gear. I'm already in full throttle. With that full throttle, it's going to give me a little rotation as the diff engages. And boom, get a good run coming out. Any questions with the first 2 little chicanes there before we get into the crazy, hectic, high-speed S's? No? Okay. Continuing onward. All right, so now we come into the fun and probably the more difficult parts, and probably one of the more difficult sections in racing that I can remember. This is not easy, so please don't get discouraged with it. So in these high speed S's, what we're trying to do is we're trying to minimize the amount of speed we scrub. They are fast. We need to keep our speed up. And we need to understand what's coming after the S's. What's ultimately going to end up happening is we're going to feel really good about the first few S's. And then as we get further through the S's, it's going to feel like we're falling behind. But that's okay because the final S, we can shortcut effectively. So what I mean by that is we're going to take this S, this first left-hander, like a really fast left-hander. We're going to get over, we're going to kiss this inside curb, get off the throttle, and we're going to let the car run to this spot. This looks kind of like a terrible situation for this next right-hander, but it's fine because we can, one, use the inside here as part of the track, and two, this right-hand corner, all it's doing is setting up the left-hander. So the whole goal is to keep the car right after this right-hander. There's no need. If this was a traditional corner, we'd think that we'd want the car somewhere out here. We'd sacrifice this first corner, get the car out here, sacrifice the second corner, get the car off to the right to set up for the last corner, right? But it doesn't work that way because of the way the corners are shaped. So as we come through this first corner, we can carry a lot of speed through here, let the car run all the way straight, and then kind of shortcut this right-hander. So we're taking this corner, which should be, frankly, off track, but it's not, because it's all concrete. And because we take it at such a shallow angle, we can end up on the right side of the track to set up for this left-hander. This left-hander now, we have to get the car over to the left, but we need to do a super late apex. So one of the goals and one of the things I try to think about is where this like concrete ends at the grass. I'm trying to keep the car pretty engaged with the curbing to get in this area and sector because it enables me to get the car over to the left to set up for the next right. So it's very easy on this left-hander right here to turn in too soon, apex too early, and then end up all the way on the right side of the track. And then you've got to slow the car down to get it all the way to the left to set up for the next one. The later we can take it, the better. Now we're going to have to get out of the throttle through here because otherwise we'd wash out and get ourselves in a really bad spot. So you can see I've got just maintenance throttle in the car. Keeping that steering angle, I can get the car all the way over to the left to brake to set up for the right-hander. This right-hander is the tough corner in my opinion. Those were relatively easy. This is the tough one. You need to carry speed, but you can't carry so much speed that you just completely wash out. It's also slightly off camber. So as we look through the corner, we can barely see the track. That means there's no camber. There's nothing helping us. In fact, it's probably hurting us. So as we kind of crest the apex, the track's falling away, the grip just disappears. So we just have to be aware of that. So what we want to do is we want to get in here. We want to apex the grass. So like that previous corner, there is concrete that touches grass, which touches the rumble strip. We want our right side tires basically to drive over that. That's our apex point. So boom, apex right there. Keep the car will land on the back end. Looks like we're in a terrible position for this left-hander, right? But because of the track limits, we can now just engage it super shallow. And since this corner opens up, we can keep our foot just absolutely pinned because the track is opening up and giving us track on the way out. And just keep our hands nice and quiet, jump over the curb, and let the car track out naturally. In fact, you usually don't even need to go all the way up over this curb. If we look at the speed I'm carrying through here, I mean, my lowest speed is at that first apex, it's 80 miles an hour. So as I'm coming in, I turn in, I get off the brakes, I roll the speed, start feeding on throttle, and now I'm full throttle from here through the rest. If you take that corner, this final corner traditionally, the traditional line would look, you would take this corner even later, right? You would apex somewhere where my cursor is here and keep the car on the right side of the track. So when you're right here, if you were taking this like a traditional corner, you'd be somewhere over here. And then you would turn in and have a good, kind of slingshot through here. The problem with that is your minimum speed through this right-hander is going to be something like 60 miles an hour, if that is. And if that's the way you're taking the corner. And if it's 60 miles an hour, I got 20 miles an hour difference on you, and then not including I'm accelerating from that point all the way down the straight. So it's a little bit, this section, like I said, it feels like you slowly start getting further and further behind in it. And when you get to this point, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to make this corner. But because the track opens up at the exit, that's totally fine because you can just straight line this. So long as you've got your right side tires on the curbing, you're good to go. Questions about the S's? There's got to be questions about the S's. They're sketchy. Nobody? You guys still hear me, right?
I find I get track limits on the right-hander often if I'm on the grass too early.
Right here?
Exactly. I'm not sure. Maybe I have both sets of wheels off at that point.
If
I'm
you,
not sure.
yeah, if you dunk your wheels in the grass, so you cross over and you touch this grass, yes, you will get a 1X. So this is like the weird spot that the 1X isn't the curbing. So, because I tried to like, oh, I can keep, as long as I keep two wheels on the curbing, I'm good. And I actually cut through the grass, left side tires on the curbing, and I got the 1X. So this is the spot, is when this concrete ends. Basically, if you drive through the grass, you're going to get a 1X if you're touching the grass. So keep that in mind. I don't know if the rules say that on turn.
Oh, I thought you said you could touch the grass with your right.
Well, you can nibble it. You can't put a tire completely in it. So like right here,
Got it.
my front tire is hanging over the grass, right? Barely.
Perfect.
That's fine. It's over the grass, but the main part of the tire is still touching the curbing. So I think if you have your right side tires touching the curbing, you're good. If they go completely over and touch the grass, then you're going to get a 1X. But annoyingly, I don't think... Yeah, it doesn't say anything about it. There's turn 8 and 9,
No, it's
but
bizarre.
we're talking 10, 11, 12. So they don't even have a instruction on it. That's funny. That's great. Anyway, so great question. All right, so we got a good run through there. Screaming down to the stadium section. One of the things I saw in the prelude last night, people are braking way too early for this corner. Way too early. Brake at the curbing, or just before the curbing. I'm just now I'm touching the brakes right here. I just turned my lights on. So basically, you've got lots of different things we can see. You can use the curbing. You can use the seam color as a brake point. There's lots and lots of good visuals for a good brake zone coming into here. The thing about this right-hander is after you go through the apex, it comes on camber. Or there's a lot of, you're going uphill, you're compressing the car into the ground, you're getting a lot of grip in the vehicle. So when you turn in, there's no grip, and then when you go past apex, all of a sudden the grip happens. So when you turn in, you feel like you won't make the corner, but as you go through the corner, it comes back in. So you have to trust it. Also, the wider you can take it, the better. This curving is super smooth. I always feel like I'm turning in too early here. So you do your braking, get down, you start your turn in, a little bit of chill brake, and then get off the brake. If you have too much brake while you're turning and going down to this corner, the front end, you're asking too much of the front tires. You're asking them to slow down and turn, and they won't do it both. So it's brake, kind of a little bit of trail on the way in, and then get off the brake. It's kind of amazing. As soon as you get off that brake, the front end actually turns because you're not asking them to brake as well. So brake, trail off, and then basically completely off the brakes before apex. You can see what I mean by you're kind of off camber on the entry, but as soon as you crest over the apex, here's the compression zone right here. That's where the car is going to grip up and turn. So you're understeer, 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 and then right here, boom, you grip up. And the car will end up right here if you do it right. Like you can't end up anywhere else. We want to accelerate through the compression zone, so we want to pick up that throttle as soon as we can. So you can actually see my throttle trace. I am getting on the throttle right here. So I am picking up throttle through here. My min speed is probably right there, 65 miles an hour. And then compression, good to go. all the way up the hill. Coming into the stadium, this left-hander, my visual is nowhere over here. My visual is the apex point over here. We're going uphill, so you actually can't, it's very difficult to see. And based on where your seating position in the car, whether how high or how low, will kind of dictate this next bit. But what I'm doing is I'm looking over here, and as soon as I can see the curbing right here, that's where I'm getting on the brakes. It also happens to be at the top of second gear for me. So as soon as I'm getting up to second gear and I hear that noise or that meh, I'm braking. That just, everything feels right here, but my main visual or my main feeling is looking up at the apex. As soon as I can see basically that yellow curbing and the candy stripe curbing, that's where I'm getting on the brake. The brake for this corner is super, you have to brake in a straight line, and then you're going to kind of try to diamond it off really early, and we're going to try to do a super late apex. And I don't like getting up on this curb. I've done it, got the left side tires on it. It bounces the car around a lot, and it just seems like I have to wait forever for it to settle. Keeping it off the curbing seems to keep the platform really stable and allows me to get on throttle sooner. I'm in first gear, by the way, through here. So super late apex. I'm apexing here. So I'm apexing after the turtle. My eyes are up. I'm looking at the next turtle. And then what I do is I kind of draw a straight line through there, right through here. Remember, as long as you keep your left side tires on the rumble, you're good. So I apex at the turtle here. So this is where the suspension and taking the rubber stops out of the suspension is important, because if you have them too low, you're going to put this curbing into the chassis and it's going to kick you up. So you want the car to be pretty as compliant as it can be. I mean, this is super rough. I mean, look at the height of that curb. I think it's massive, right? I try to apex and try to go around this apex right here. This is my apex point. I'm going to bounce over the curb, up, and then I try to end up right here between the curbing and the wall. Now, this is what I thought they had changed. I thought this was going to be a 1X now based on the rules, but the rules don't say anything about this section of the track, this part of the curbing. So this is fine, and I actually before the classroom, went in and ran some laps to make sure that I wasn't getting 1Xs now all of a sudden, and I wasn't. So I drive the car between the two. So I'm on the left side of the curbing here, and I'm doing everything I can to try to open this right-hander as much as I can. Understand that when you turn over this right-hander right here, the car is going to bounce up. So you're going to turn, it's going to turn a little bit, hit that curb, and then kind of bounce straight, and then land on the backside and then turn again. So you always feel like you're turning in early, and you are turning in early, but it's because when you go over the curbing, it's going to go straight for a little bit and then turn. Second gear, we're going to apex this just as a normal apex. Try to get down as close as you can. It's difficult to do over that curbing, but as soon as you're through there, the track comes uphill a little bit. It compresses. You get a little bit of grip. The car is going to really try to understeer through here. We're going to keep our steering angle on the car because we want to apex down here close to the pit wall and get a good run coming out down the front straight. So yeah, that is Mexico. Any questions? Anything you want to see again? You guys experts now? Good to go? You're going to go start running 43s, 42s, 41s? Hopefully? Cool. All right. Well, I give you guys the best of luck for season 15, as usual. This is going to be a long series. And actually, I want to talk about that real quick. Where is it? Let's open up the website. Series Racing 15. This is a long series. It's going to go January, February, March, and April. So it goes all the way to almost the end of April. So we got 4 months. If you're looking, and we can talk more about this in another classroom, but if you're looking to do well in the series, in the championship, remember it's not one race for the championship. One race isn't going to set your championship. It can lose it for you if you crash out, especially if you do it in multiple races. But you can't win the race in one championship, or you can't win the championship in one race. So keep that in mind. If your goal is to do well in the championship, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Yes, everybody wants to win every race. Everybody wants to go out there. We're driving and we're racing to win races. But the reason championships exist is because it's a test of whoever can be consistent. I've won multiple championships here at PCA, not by winning races, but by being consistently being in the top 5. And it ends up being okay. So long race or championship schedule that we've got. Make sure you keep it in mind. Make sure you got a good practice schedule, and make sure when you're practicing on something that is going to benefit you as a driver and as a racer. Don't just go out and turn laps, because at the end of the day, it's very easy to just go out and turn laps. It's difficult to practice with a purpose. So make sure you're practicing with a purpose. Maximize that time you do have, and you will see results. And as always, if you have any questions whatsoever, whether it be setup, whether it be the track, whether it be what my favorite cheese is, message me on Discord. I'll be happy to chat with you, and we can get you sorted and get you straight. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, so it doesn't become too terribly long for our folks watching the TV land. So thank you guys for watching so much. If you have any questions, again, reach out to me. The next classroom will be 2 weeks from now, on Monday what is that? It's going to be Monday the 19th. So until then, good luck in your races, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.